Welcome to the City Current Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. Our mission at City Current is to power the good, and we do that through positive media, events, and philanthropy. This show features interviews with a mix of business and community leaders who discuss important efforts, trends, lessons learned, and ways to get involved so we can learn more about our community and work together to make a difference. Now, on to the show.
Welcome to the City Current Radio Show. I'm your host, Andrew Bartolotta. Today, we are talking with gifted storyteller, photographer, author, and peacemaker, John Noltner. John, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Andrew. It's good to be with you again.
Give listeners a quick history for you and your career before we dive into your new book.
So I have spent my career as a freelance photographer, shooting for national magazines and Fortune 500 companies. Did that for 20 years or so. And back in 2008, 2009, two different things were going on in my life. The first is that I was frustrated with the quality of our national dialogue. I was concerned about all the things that ask us to look at what can separate us. And I wondered if there was something I could do with my photography and storytelling instead to remember what connects us. The second thing that was going on at that time is I like to say that the economy handed me some free time. The recession hit the world of freelance photography hard and fast. And if I was a better business person, I would have used that time to look for new clients. But I was concerned about this state of our social dialogue. And so I started just interviewing people and photographing them based around the question, what does peace mean to you? And what started as this small personal project, this little side gig, has now become my life's work.
Now, you're an author of 3 books, the newest being Portraits of Peace, Searching for Hope in a Divided America. Talk about what readers can learn from this book and then what inspired it.
So really, my first 2 books were rooted in sharing other people's stories. I intentionally quieted my own voice. I took a portrait of these people. We did these interviews, and the books are just a collection of their stories and their portraits. Eventually, in the course of doing this for 10 years or so, I realized that I had something that I wanted to say as well. Something about encountering difference, something about challenging my own expectations, listening deeply, learning how to be a better ally. And so I started writing this book. And so what you'll find, it's more of a memoir. It's a combination of travel log and memoir and social commentary. It's pretty earnest because there are some serious challenges that we all face in the world, but it's also got a little bit of whimsy in it because that's who I am. And I think sometimes, it's important that we face these challenges honestly and directly, but I also think that it's important that we face them with a hope, a grace, and a belief that something better is possible. And so what you'll find is a combination of my own personal journey in working on this project, as well as sharing some of the wisdom and beauty of the folks who I encountered along the way.
You've traveled over 40,000 miles, traveling around the country, giving keynotes and workshops and sharing your exhibition, talking about how storytelling is a way to connect people. Give us a few stories that have impacted you and others. You currently sold your home and are on the road full time. So tell us more about that as well.
As I was finishing this book, we're in the midst of the pandemic. George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis, just a few miles north of my house. We're going through a really contentious political season. And so as I was finishing this book, it was clear that there was even more work to do. There were even more stories to tell. And so my wife, Karen, and I decided, our kids were grown. I was tired of mowing the lawn. And no, that's a lie. She was tired of mowing the lawn. That's something that she enjoyed doing. We were sort of done with this house that we had raised our family in. So we decided to sell it. And we bought an RV. And for the last 11 months now, we've been on the road, traveling the country, gathering news stories for what I'm sure will be book number 4 eventually. But some of the stories that we've met, what continues to fascinate me is all of these people that we've met who have encountered significant challenges in their lives, but they have chosen to respond with grace and forgiveness and hope. And again, the belief that something better is possible. And so what I find the most fascinating is people who find themselves in difficult situations, but make the choice to move towards healing instead of division, who make the choice to move towards transformation. And so, these are people like Bud Welsh, who I met in Oklahoma City, who lost his only child, Julie Marie, in the Oklahoma City bombing. But eventually realized that he needed to meet Timothy McVeigh's father, the perpetrator of the violence, and let him know that he didn't hold his father responsible for what had happened. So they sat together at the dining or at the kitchen table, and got to know one another at the McVeigh family house. And Bud realized there that he realized he didn't want Timothy McVeigh to die. He didn't want Timothy McVeigh to be executed. And he realized that he was forgiving him. Bud says in his interview, he said, I'll tell you one thing, forgiveness doesn't do a thing for the killer, but you absolutely free yourself. And that's where the good happens. People like Panina Bowman in Atlanta, Georgia, who tells a story about growing up in World War II Europe, when her family was taken to a concentration camp and 42 members of her family died at Auschwitz. And she talks about how difficult of an experience that was, but she also said that when she was there, she realized that she didn't want to hate. She made a choice not to hate, because she realized that hate is intended to destroy somebody else, but in fact, it circles back and it destroys you instead. So these amazing stories of courage and hope and forgiveness and transformation, and people who are finding ways to bridge divides and build community in extraordinary circumstances.
What are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned that have surprised you along your 40,000 plus mile journey?
Oh man, there are so many lessons, Andrew. And that's the fascinating thing for me, is each time I sit down with somebody and have a conversation, someone with a different life experience than me, someone with a different political bend than me, when we sit down and we have these full and deep conversations, I wind up learning something from everybody along the way. Eventually, there are some really interesting themes that have developed. But for me personally, the three lessons that I keep coming back to are, first, to listen deeply. We'll listen in order to correct or coerce or convince somebody or debate or debunk. But the act of listening just to understand can be rare. And so this has been a practical exercise in deep listening. And so that's the first lesson, to listen deeply. The second is to challenge my own expectations. I walk into so many of these interviews with expectations, with preconceived notions. And I find as we sit down and we have these full conversations, as I engage in this deep listening, I have the opportunity to challenge those expectations, to realize that the reality is a little bit more complex and a little bit more nuanced than I understood walking into it. So that's the second. And the third one is to just keep showing up. All of these challenges that we face in the world, these are not challenges that are going to have overnight solutions. These are not short-term issues that we're going to have to deal with, whether we're talking about race or class or gender, politics, faith, any of these things. These are long-term commitments. And along the way, we're going to stumble. Along the way, we're going to hit roadblocks. But if we commit to keep showing up, if we commit to keep doing the work, together we can find a path forward. So I think those are the three at the root. Listen deeply, challenge your own expectations, and keep showing up. And these are things that you don't have to sell your house and take a 40,000 mile road trip to do. These are things that you can do each and every day in our encounters with one another.
Absolutely. Those are lessons we can all learn from. And I love those three tips. John, you're helping a polarized world rediscover the common humanity that connects us. You're creating your legacy every day, but what do you want people to say about John Noltner decades from now?
I could answer that in a couple different ways. First, I'll joke a little bit. There's an oral historian by the name of Studs Terkel used to work for Chicago Public Radio. He has been a hero of mine as I was growing up. If someday somebody says John Noltner was like Studs Terkel, but with a camera, I would be thrilled. But more than anything, I would hope that people would say John Noltner helped create a space where people could pause and consider the complexities of the issues, and learn how to bridge divides and build community.
You give keynote presentations and workshops and sharing your exhibition for those who are a company, a community that want to bring you, John, to their city. How does that look like? What is that sort of entail, and how can people reach out to you?
Yeah. The easiest way to reach out is on our website, which is just apieceofmymind.net, or the acronym APOMM.net. We do everything from adult education hours in churches and faith communities to week-long and even month-long residencies at universities and companies and conferences across the country. And we'll install the exhibit. I'll do workshops around storytelling as a way to connect. And the other thing we do, which is really interesting, is I'll set up a portable studio and we'll gather stories on site. This is something that you saw at the Points of Light conference, where we'll ask a prompt. We'll do a black and white portrait and ask for a 25-word response. And in a day, we can collect 30 or 40 or 50 or sometimes even 100 of these. And then in an insane timeline, we crunch these files, we do the production overnight, and then we reflect them back to the community at a closing session. And this is a way to use this kind of photography and storytelling to help communities articulate their mission, vision, and values in the world. So we do that in person around the country. We also do virtual workshops and programs around the country as well.
Very cool. Now, again, where can people go to learn more about you, purchase your books, learn about your new book, and contact you about having you come to their city?
Yeah, apieceofmymind.net, and it's PEACE, that kind of peace. And there's a contact page right there where people can reach us. If folks are interested in the new book, Portraits of Peace, Searching for Hope in a Divided America, that's available anywhere you buy books. Amazon, Barnes and Noble. You can walk down to your neighborhood bookstore and ask for it, and they'll be able to get it too. So wherever you like to buy books, ask for Portraits of Peace and they'll have it.
Once again, that's Portraits of Peace, Searching for Hope in a Divided America. John Noltner, thank you so much for joining us today.
Andrew, it's great to be with you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Welcome to the City Current Radio Show. I'm your host, Andrew Bartolotta. Today, we have the privilege of speaking with Fortune 50 leader and author of the book, What About Me? Walking the Tightrope as a Black Man in America, D. John Jackson. John, thanks for joining us today.
It's my pleasure, Andrew. Glad to be with you.
Give listeners an idea for your career and expertise as a Fortune 50 leader in strategic planning, engineering, and more.
I have a wonderful career. I've had a chance to see quite a few things in engineering, strategic planning, globally, in artificial intelligence, things of that sort, things that are really exciting in the cutting edge of technology. And I've been very fortunate and very blessed to have the opportunity and the gift to be able to navigate in those spaces. But as time rolled along, I felt that there was more that I wanted to do. I wanted to give back and pour more into the ethos of this world about how we can look at human beings and help. And, this evolution has just taken place. But, very exciting career, continuing to do that, but wanted to do even more to give back.
Written specifically for young Black men and boys in America today, your book, What About Me, speaks to and for all marginalized or underrepresented voices with a call of courage and perseverance. What made you decide to become an author?
One of the things, it's my parents, the way they taught me. My parents were very, very influential. They taught me and my brother and sisters that respect everyone. There should be respect regardless of race, color, creed, socioeconomic status, gender. And they always tried to live by example. They exposed us to all kinds of people and always emphasizing the respect. And that's just been a part of me. That's just been a core of my fiber. And as you start to grow older, you start to experience things, you see things. And I just thought I need to write about what they taught me and in my experiences. And then how could I possibly educate, encourage, and inspire others? Black men and boys, any people of color, women, anyone who feels like their story has been misunderstood or marginalized. How can they learn from my stories and my lessons and forge ahead? And by forging ahead, that means, standing strong, and wherever you start from, you can achieve. And so really the book is a feel-good book. It's a narrative, it's about stories, but it's how to inspire people that they can overcome and do just as well as I've done or even more.
Now, the book also has an accompanying documentary. Talk about that.
The book is really about my life, how I was raised, those things that my parents taught me, and then my experiences, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and how I had to deal with those and what I learned. And really at some point ask the question like, wow, why are these things happening to me? But at some point having that epiphany that, guess what? I can use these things to help others. And so it turns into that story that I talk about, how to encourage and inspire. The documentary talks about a broader spectrum of African-American men and boys. What are their experiences? How do we hone in on their untold stories, the things that they experience, and to show that they're not monolithic? The documentary speaks to, I've got attorneys, I've got stars, I've got people in college, and there's this age-old myth in media, mass media, that typically Black men and boys have three categories. They're stars, they're athletes, or they're on the wrong side of the law, and that's pretty much it. And so what the documentary does is expound upon those individuals. They're great bankers or attorneys. They can be carpenters, they can be craftsmen. They've got ideas, they've got feelings, they're good fathers, they're good bankers, all of those things that typically are not exposed. So I'm really showing both sides, the book being about my life and how it's interwoven into the rest of these experiences that others have, but then focusing here on the story that usually doesn't get told in mass media.
Well, and I also like that you don't shy away from vulnerable conversations around racism, privilege. You say that education about history is key to understanding the root of racism and knowing how to dismantle it. Why do you think Americans are so uneducated about their history, and how can we remedy this unfortunate truth?
Well, I'll tell you, Andrew, on top of being an engineer, a scientist, futurist, and all these kind of things, history was probably my first love. My parents, just early on, learning history and reading history and trying to understand not only the political sides of history, but the human aspect, the human toll. And so one of the things I feel is that, in certain ways and cultures, the true facts don't ever come out because actually they're not discussed, they're not taught. And the example that I use in a lot of my speeches is that the issue of racism and the things that have transpired are like a problem, a really tough problem, a math problem as an analogy. And the only way you solve a tough math problem, whether it's calculus or chemistry or physics, you have to have the facts. And by having the facts, you can bring a group of people together to get a great solution. You may not like all the facts, but you can get to the solution for the problem. And I see that with these issues and ills that we face today, whether it's, microaggressions, it's racism, it's these issues of conflict. And I think if you get the facts and then people learn, that's the base layer. And then once you learn, how do we do better? And so that's why I think history is so important to understand the fact. Just in the last year or so, I've had so many people say, I didn't know, I didn't understand. And, shame on us for not explaining those things, but some of those things are hard to deal with. And I think, again, back to my math problem, sometimes the facts are hard to deal with because they'll lead you to the solution. But here's the deal. There have to be consistent facts. If we were a group of scientists and we were solving a tough chemistry problem, and if half of the room said, wow, water freezes at 19 degrees Fahrenheit, and one half says, no, it freezes at 60 degrees Fahrenheit. And then there's a group that says, no, it's proven, it's scientific fact, it's 32 degrees Fahrenheit, except for Antarctica, where there may be a few degrees off. Can you imagine how tough it would be to get to the solution because you've got people all over the place? But once we coalesce around, wow, guys, it's 32 degrees plus or minus one, we can put those facts into the equation and solve it. And that's what I try to do, is how can we bring people together to work together to solve these issues?
Now let's talk about microaggressions. Give listeners a short definition for microaggressions, and then share some of that you feel comfortable with, maybe some you've experienced at the hands of privileged people or those that you've come in contact with.
It's one of the reasons I wrote Walking the Tightrope. I work for a fantastic company now. It's great. But over my career, I've worked for different companies and in different places. But I do remember one case where a gentleman walked up to me and says, "Wow, I was wondering if there was anything more to you than just the suit you have on." Just walked up to me and said that. I couldn't make that up. And I was floored because I was, okay, what did you mean by that? And that was one of those things as if to indict me just on nothing. And so I realized that, and that's just one. I have many. I know in one case, as a young engineering manager, many years ago at a company I worked for, and I was new and I came into the organization, and there was a gentleman that walked up to my new boss as he was introducing me, and he said, "Do I have to listen to what this guy says and does?" And it wasn't a joke; it was serious. And the guy kind of, when my new boss said, "Yeah, he's your new manager," the guy kind of scoffed and walked off. So those are the things that I've experienced, just a few examples. Those are minor examples, but microaggressions are those things that people endure. They can be comments, they can be behaviors or looks that usually cut at your integrity and cut at you as a person in a very disdaining way. And you just have to deal with it. And a lot of times people are, "Oh, I didn't know that kind of thing happens," but it does happen. It happens to this day. I've interviewed a lot of people in different companies around the world, in the US and what have you, and people give me stories of, "This happened to me and this happens to me all the time," and people say these things.
Well, I will say you are a very sharp dressed man, but you also have way more than just the suit going on. You have the leadership and you have the brains and you have the knowledge. And I think that microaggressions can really chisel at your pride, and for you to be able to move past those and know that that they're coming your way, but also that they don't define who you are, is something that can help others. Now, here's sort of a $1 million question, but what do you believe people can do to end racism in America?
I think first and foremost is an acknowledgement and a recognition of the historical past and things that have occurred. The next thing I think is to listen. We've got to listen. Again, I talk about common ground. You've heard me talk about this in the past. Common ground, how do we come together? In my book, I talk about we inhabit one big blue marble. We only have one. And as a famous man once said, we either live together as brothers, and I'll paraphrase, as sisters and brothers, or we perish as fools. And I believe that's really true. No one really understands the anarchy and the alternatives to the life that we live. It may not be perfect, the environment, but we have to come together to work to make this the best place. We have one Earth. I know there's a lot of talk about going to other planets and doing other things. That may not even occur in our lifetimes, and that's far-fetched. But let's take advantage of what we have together. There's so much wonderful collective greatness in the collective body, bringing people together. I always talk about bringing people together for common goals and seeking these lofty objectives, and saying, what can we do to raise and elevate everyone? And that's what I think is so important. And when you do that, it makes us stronger. It makes the country stronger. It's just like a basketball team, Andrew. You got 12 guys on the team and you only want 3 to be really good, and you forget about the other 8. One of those guys gets hurt, or you need them in the championship and you hadn't taught them, you hadn't invested in them, and guess what? You lose the championship. I don't want us to lose the big championship. I want us to thrive. And I think that means acknowledging, understanding, and then reaching out, having allyship, coming together to make us collectively stronger.
Well, I think that's so true. And one word or 2 words that we've heard over the past decade, I know me and you both many times, is the words collective impact. And so I think that's true, because a rising tide lifts all boats. And I think when we come together and vulnerably and we learn from each other, that's when we can truly grow and prosper in America and around the world. What puts a smile on your face when you look at the men you've been able to mentor, people that have really learned from this book, this documentary? What puts a smile on John Jackson's face when you look at the work that you're able to accomplish?
I've had responses from all over the world, but there's one from a lady in Toronto, Canada. And she said, "John, you're not only speaking to people of color or Black people, you're educating and making all of us better." And she wrote that to me and actually got my email and sent me information, sent me a picture of the book that she had purchased. I don't know these people. And so that means that my vision, my strategy, what I'm trying to pour into the world, what I'm trying to add to the ether, to the ethos of who we are, it's reaching people. I had a lady in Dubai who sent me a message. I don't know who she is, but that means it's working. And then I see individuals, young men are saying, wow, I'm glad somebody spoke about this because I had the same situation. So I've seen this plethora of things where the work, starting from, little old me, the work is going into areas and spaces that I had always dreamed about, but had not envisioned yet. And I just want to push it out even more to show people that there is a way to a much better place. It won't be easy, and there'll always be bumps. But if we work together collectively, and if we come together, there's a much better world out there. And I always use this term, endless opportunities and marvelous possibilities. And I think I truly believe that.
Where can people go to learn more about you, your book, and documentary?
You can buy it on Amazon.com, or it's on blackbookstore.com. The documentary is on Amazon Prime Video. It's streaming now. And then just for the book, www.djohnjackson.com.
Thank you for working to power the good in the community and for coming on the City Current radio show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure, and you're doing a fantastic job. I appreciate everything you do.
Thank you for watching the City Current Show, which is produced by City Current with funding provided by Lipscomb & Pitts Insurance, a Higginbotham company. To learn more about each of the guests, to share your stories of others, leading by example, or to watch past episodes and more media focused on good news, visit our website at citycurrent.com or follow along on social media using the handle or hashtag CityCurrent. We look forward to seeing you again soon, and thank you for all you do to power the good.